Hello, my friends. I'm Dennis Prager, and this is known as the Dennis Prager Show. I hope you read my column today. Every Tuesday, my column comes out. It's at DennisPrager.com, townhall.com, and then goes around the internet. And it is my thesis, which I explained yesterday in hour one, that somebody must go to prison for the killing of the woman on the set of the Alec Baldwin movie. And it's not only about that, well, it is about that primarily, but it is also something you will not find in almost any column. It is a Bible lesson. It's very powerful stuff and very new for 99% of readers, even people who are biblically literate. But it gives you an idea of what happens in a society that takes the Bible seriously versus one that does not. And the killing of a person is taken more seriously in biblical ethics than in secular ethics. That's the way it is. So, hello everybody, listen to this. Are you ready? We have truly gone mad. And I have an explanation for, or at least many explanations for why we have gone mad. But I'm going to give you this particular example, which needless to say will be the last thing on my list. No question about it. And am I right? I'm right. National Theatre of Scotland bans the word spooky at Halloween, as it is a, quote, racial slur. Did you know that spooky was a racial slur? Oh, if you didn't, that is no excuse for your racist ignorance. The arts organizations say, it's from British source, that's why they use the plural say, we would say the arts organization says, that the sinister history of the word during World War II was brought to their attention by staff members at the organization. The word spooky has been cancelled this Halloween after National Theatre Scotland, NTS, banned the word from their shows after it was identified as a racial slur. NTS planned to drop the alleged racist slur despite the fact that businesses from supermarkets to Visit Scotland are planning to use the term in the build-up to October 31st. Wow. They got him just in time. That is spooky. That's right. Did you know that the word, let me think of one here. The word thumb is racist. That's right, the word thumb. Do you know that there is no word that we cannot find some college graduate to assert is racist? That's right. Thumb was used in slavery in the 18th and 19th centuries in the Caribbean. That's right. Thumb. Do you know that there is no word, as I said, that I could not make the case for its racist origins? The organization last used the term in 2016 for a Christmas carol at the Old Kirk in Kirkcaldy, when the venue was described as a, quote, spooky location. Those racists. However, the charity has expressed a commitment to fighting racism following the global Black Lives Matter movement, and as part of that, they have identified offensive words, including spooky. I don't like to snitch on my fellow workers, but I feel that I'm morally obligated to say that Sean has used the word spooky at least 4 times in our years together. Okay. That was, I'm sorry, I feel bad. I don't want you to think of it as snitching. Rather, it is racial awareness on the part of a white man. A theater source said, no one has complained. This is epic. What I'm about to read you is epic. A theater source said, quote, no one has complained about it, but there were worries they could in the future. We have now reached a new low, and it's hard to reach new lows from the left. It's very, very hard. But this is clearly, no one has actually alleged that it is racist, but somebody might in the future. That is my theory about the word thumb. There are thumb people who will undoubtedly assert that thumb is racist. There's been a lot of training and meetings since the BLM movement and how NTS should change, National Theatre Scotland. It might seem mad, but NTS is committed to fighting racism. Yes, it does seem mad, NTS. That is correct. You are bored cowards. I don't know which is greater, your boredom or your cowardice. To fighting racism. You're fighting racism, or are you making the fight against racism ludicrous? That's what they are. They're making it utterly silly. But they're doing something even more important, which I will come to momentarily. So need to be extra careful in the language it uses. It's always been a really white organization, but it is trying to change that and become more diverse. There might not be many people who know that spooky can also be used as racist. And now, one of the great lines of the piece. But even if it's one person who is offended, it is one person too many. Wow. Maybe the person is an idiot. Is that possible? Why is anyone, and it's always on the left, no one on the right could possibly be offended appropriately, but why is anyone on the left offended, taken seriously? Maybe your taking offense is foolish, is puerile, meaning profoundly childish. Maybe you are a bored narcissist. Not maybe. You are definitely a bored narcissist. Issues with the word have reemerged in the United States over the last decade or so, the Daily Record reports. It is believed that the Dutch word spook translates to ghost in English and has been used since the 19th century. It has also been used to describe a spy. But U.S. military officers used the term in a more sinister way during World War II by using it as a derogatory term to describe black pilots. In 2000, Philip Roth wrote a book called The Human Stain, which told the story of an academic forced to quit after calling two black students spooks. And in 2010, supermarket chain Target apologized after selling black soldier action figures called spook drop parachuters. But why is that negative? And isn't it a good thing to sell black action figures? Black soldier action figures? Okay, so I just wanted you to know that. Latest figures show over 91% of the National Theatre of Scotland board and 87% of its core staff are white. White. That is spooky. What was that, my friends? That was spooky. Of course it wasn't me. I'm not even on that page. That was spooky, my friends. That's it. Why is this done? I'll tell you the reason. Because there is so little racism, they must invent examples of it.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
It occurs that today, when we're talking, 22 of the 25 ranked colleges in national football by the AP are in red states. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. And in some of those 25 that are in purple states, like Penn State, are in the red part of the purple state. Only Oregon and San Diego State are in blue states. Do you have a theory? I do, as to why college football succeeds in red states far beyond the way it succeeds in blue states today?
Well, I think it represents this. It doesn't, and it's unlike pro football, which has become performance woke art. I think a lot of people in these places incorporate going out to a Saturday football game as in the same sense as 4th of July or standing for the national anthem or singing God Bless America. It's a festive public ritual for red state America, and in a way that pro sports used to be, but now the NBA or the NFL, even Major League Baseball, has forfeited that. It's become a Hollywood-centric or celebrity-centric or New York-centric sport. So I think and actually their popularity is increasing as a result that people innately like sports, but they're shifting from pro sports, I think, to what you talk about.
Well, I also want to add to your assessment. When you think about this, the red states are least amenable to woke college politics.
You're generally correct, because especially the Board of Regents or the overseers, they come from business, they come from all walks of life, and they just don't put up with it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
That's what we do. That is correct. 1-8-Prager-776. The word spooky is racist, according to the National Theatre of Scotland. Scotland has flipped out. It's one of the most woke places on earth. They feel great about themselves. They're fighting racism by getting rid of the word spooky. I'd like to remind you, everybody, that this is a great time to contact andrewandtodd.com at Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They have been with me from the beginning of the lockdown. Just last week on Friday, a woman called in, and before she spoke about what she called in with regard to, she spoke about Andrew and Todd and how terrific they were. Completely unasked for statement of support for these people. So if you want a new loan, you want to take cash out, you want to get a new home, whatever it might be, andrewandtodd.com at Sierra Pacific Mortgage. andrewandtodd.com. I met these guys and I like them a great deal. They are as honest as they are competent. 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172, or andrewandtodd.com. Yes, indeed. I am here only with the racist himself, Sean, who has used spooky 4 times. And every time I remember saying to him, I can't believe it. You're using the word spooky? And he just continued in his ways. It's a good thing the living martyr's not here. He's still out on quarantine because of COVID. He'll be out on quarantine for about 2 months. Guy's been negative for a week. But anyway, that's the rules. The rules are the rules. I had COVID 2 weeks ago, and I am the proud carrier of natural immunity. The best type you can possibly have. And I attribute my good health and minimal reaction to COVID to a 1.5 years of hydroxychloroquine and zinc and ivermectin and the natural antibodies that were put into my body. These were fantastic things which should have been done to everybody. Instead, vast numbers of Americans were allowed to die by the medical profession, which has staked its diminishing credibility on the vaccine alone. I don't say the vaccine doesn't work. I say that depending on that alone has been a death warrant. Not because the vaccine kills, but because other things are better, or might be better, like the prophylactic medicines. We will have a Yale epidemiologist on at the bottom of the hour. Ask him what he thinks about all of this. Don't fool yourselves when you say you follow the science. You follow the scientists you want to follow. You don't follow the science. They follow the compliance. That is a fair statement, by the way. Compliance has racist overtones. And if I were you, Sean, I think that and spooky have had their day. Compliance is a slave term, and we all know that. Do I make light of these terms? Of course I make light of these terms, because they're a gigantic lie. There's nothing racist about the word spooky. It's a gigantic lie. The left only lies. That's what it does, because truth is not a left-wing value. So why not lie? Does anybody listening think spooky is a racist term? So why is it used? Most important point of all, they make up these things just like all the race hoaxes about the swastikas and the N-word on dormitory doors. They make it all up because there's so little real racism. They have to make it up. Spooky is an ode to how little racism there really is. Get it? So they invent lies. But these lies have an effect on the young brainwashed, who come out of college thinking they're wonderful because they're fighting racism, which is almost non-existent. Of course there's racism. There's everything. There's anti-Semitism. And I'm a Jew, and I'm telling you it is a blessing to be a Jew in America, unless the left takes over, in which case it will be a curse. Okay, 1-8 Prager 776. Yes, Washington Post, September, last month. Natural immunity to COVID is powerful. Policymakers seem afraid to say so. People making decisions. This is the Washington Post, a lying newspaper. So it's shocking to have this article by Marty McCary, professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, editor-in-chief of MedPage Today. Many elected leaders and public health officials have held on far too long to the hypothesis that natural immunity offers unreliable protection against COVID-19, a contention that is being rapidly debunked by science. More than 15 studies have demonstrated the power of immunity acquired by previously having the virus. A 700,000-person study from Israel found that those who had experienced prior infections, were 27 times less likely to get a second symptomatic COVID infection than those who were vaccinated. 27 times less likely. I am 27 times less likely to get symptomatic infection than those of you who were vaccinated and didn't get COVID. But I can't go to my gym. That's right, I can't get in because I didn't get a vaccine. I'm 27 times healthier than the guy who got the vaccine, but I can't go in. I live in California. Equinox is a woke organization. That's all it is. A Trump-hating CEO who follows like a coward, like a sheep, that whatever directive comes down, so that even people who had COVID cannot enter their gyms. So I quit after 5 years. 1-8 Prager 776. We continue.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
It occurs that today, when we're talking, 22 of the 25 ranked colleges in national football by the AP are in red states. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. And in some of those 25 that are in purple states, like Penn State, are in the red part of the purple state. Only Oregon and San Diego State are in blue states. Do you have a theory? I do, as to why college football succeeds in red states far beyond the way it succeeds in blue states today?
Well, I think it represents this. It doesn't, it's unlike pro football, which has become performance woke art. I think a lot of people in these places incorporate going out to a Saturday football game as in the same sense as 4th of July or standing for the national anthem or singing God Bless America. It's a festive public ritual for red state America, and in a way that pro sports used to be, but now the NBA or the NFL, even Major League Baseball, has forfeited that. It's become a Hollywood-centric or celebrity-centric or New York-centric sport. So I think and actually their popularity is increasing as a result that people innately like sports, but they're shifting from pro sports, I think, to what you talk about.
Well, I also want to add to your assessment. When you think about this, the red states are least amenable to woke college politics.
You're generally correct, because especially the Board of Regents or the overseers, they come from business, they come from all walks of life, and they just don't put up with it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Right? So this has changed in the culture. We now have entire stadiums screaming blank Joe Biden.
Right.
I actually think that in some measure this is a sign of health in the country.
I don't think you're wrong. In fact, my last column, I talk about in essence, what the American people are feeling in terms of how they're being treated by the current administration.
Now, excuse me, by the way, I'm not saying I approve of it.
Right.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Clearly.
But
No,
at the same time,
we're talking about what we're observing.
It seems like a strange sign of health that we feel free enough to say that.
Well, and I don't even know that we necessarily feel free. What I would say is that the American people feel like kind of a battered spouse at this point.
Okay, you wrote an article.
And that the administration is so abusive to how they're treating people that this reaction that you're seeing, and it started out in 2 college football stadiums. It's now been in dozens to hundreds.
It's the new wave.
NFL teams had it going on this week. Talladega or NASCAR or whatever they ran had people chanting it. There is something so inherently abusive about how people are being treated
by the government.
They are, and particularly in a society that wouldn't consider itself particularly Christocentric. And it is, I am actually thankful, to your point, to see a degree of, we're not going to let this abuse continue, even if it's nothing more than using our freedom of speech to say something that's very vulgar and attach it to him. We're not taking it anymore.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Ms. Prager here. I'm honored to have the professor of epidemiology in the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health at the Yale School of Public Health, Dr. Harvey Reich.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, sir. So there would be no reason you would. Oh no, you might. I think you might know this. Anyway, I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and I was just reading. Tell me if you agree with this. That I am many times less likely, as a result of having had COVID as opposed to having been vaccinated, to have symptomatic infection.
In the future?
Yes, in the future.
You're less likely. I can't say about the many times, but you're definitely as or less likely to get COVID in the future. You have, you're building now natural immunity to the organism. You will have immunity to a large degree against variants that might develop in the future, and it's a very strong immunity and lasts for a long time.
So, ideally, one would have COVID as opposed to the vaccination. I'm not asking you to speak against the vaccination. I'm not even implying that. I'm just saying between the two, this is the better way to go, obviously, if you're not hurt by it.
Well, yes, it's hard to predict in advance, except that we know who the people are at high risk. You know, older people, people with obesity, diabetes, people who've had cancer or have other immune suppression. Those are people who are at high risk who should validly consider getting the vaccines. Most lower risk people do fine, and certainly with the availability of early treatment, do fine, and especially children and young adults do fine almost entirely, unless, as I said, they have chronic conditions. And so both their future susceptibility to the COVID variants is going to be lower, and the population as a whole will reduce the spread of infection and future infections much more strongly with a large amount of natural immunity. And we know in the United States we have now between 50 and 70% of the population has had COVID. So we have pretty strong natural immunity, and it's only increasing with time.
What is your take on masks?
I think the evidence on masks is that it's very bad evidence. So honestly, there's no way to know whether masks really help or not. There's two possible situations. Does mask wearing help the person who's wearing the mask, and does mask wearing help people around that person, what's called source control? And the evidence is that there's too little real firm knowledge to know that there's benefit or not benefit. And so there are two studies about source control, one in the Marine barracks and the other, I think, was in Denmark, and both of them showed that there was not appreciable benefit to keeping the spread of infection down by wearing masks. So it's really hard to know that there's good evidence to support this. We do it because we all want to contribute, as best we can, but the evidence behind it is fairly weak.
What about for children at school?
For children at school, there's very little evidence that young children spread the infection very much. There's one study that just came out that purports to show high levels of virus in the nose of children, just like adults. But virus in the nose does not translate into the ability to spread it, and that's an inference. What we know about the empirical studies looking at infected children versus infected adults and spread within their families, within their home dwelling units, is that children are very, very infrequently the cause of spread to other family members. It's almost always the adults spread to children, not the other way around. So we know from empirical studies that children don't spread the infection, and that being the case, there's little rationale for putting masking children where we don't know that the mask has appreciable benefit, on top of the fact that the children don't really spread the infection very much.
So why do airlines have to have children 2 and older wear masks?
The reason for regulation is beyond my pay grade.
That's a big statement. That's very important that you said that, because your pay grade is very high. You're a professor of epidemiology. So if it's above your pay grade, it means it's completely irrational. We're going to come back in a moment with Dr. Harvey Risch. He is a professor of epidemiology. It's RISCH, in the Department of Epidemiology at Yale. I can't wait to ask him how his colleagues react to him. Indeed, how he reacts to the medical profession. In the meantime, I can tell you something that one of the rare things that left and right can agree on is relief factor, how spectacularly successful it is in curbing, suppressing pain of the joints and pain of muscles. Muscle pain and joint pain, it's phenomenal, and they have a very honest deal. They tell you if it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it probably won't work. How's that for an honest advertiser? So they have a special 3-week price of $19.95 at relieffactor.com, 800-500-8384.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I'm Dennis Prager, Yale epidemiologist. Dr. Harvey Risch is my guest. My last question to the doctor was his reaction to the masking of children ages 2 and up on airplanes. He said it was above his pay grade, which is a very sweet way of saying he has no clue as a professional epidemiologist why this is the case. So let me ask you to simply guess. Why do you think something so patently absurd is the case?
I think that there's a lot of fear. People are afraid. Companies are afraid. Everybody is just following orders from above and goes all the way up the chain of companies to their top. And even those people may be afraid. And for that reason, we see policies that look like they have face value, not to be a pun there, but that may not have any real value, and masking may fall into that category. You know, it seems at initial look that it's a harmless thing to do. We know that it's not, but that the degree of harm is still, for most people, relatively small. And but over a long term and long hours may be, less small. But that companies are doing this is because their legal teams are probably afraid that if some epidemic were to break out in their circumstances, that they would be accused of not doing everything they could to prevent it, and therefore they put all possible these kinds of so-called protective measures in place so that they're legally protected. And I think that's
that's interesting. So is it your assumption, and I understand nobody knows the answer, but is it your assumption that if the CDC and FDA announced it is unnecessary for children under the age of 16, just to pick an age, to be masked on an airplane, you think the airlines would continue to enforce it?
Probably not. They would have. See, that's the whole point, that companies, institutions all point up the chain to somebody else taking the responsibility for their decisions.
Good. So who is giving this order?
That's a good question. I think that the CDC has put a lot of these messages out, and I think that government representatives, have chimed in on the same thing on various advisory panels, and various so-called experts have made public statements on this, and I think that has colored the general perception about this.
So you're an epidemiologist, and the CDC is composed in part of epidemiologists. How do you explain they're giving orders that you don't think are rational?
I really can't explain the behavior of people who cherry-pick the evidence, and I've seen so much cherry-picked evidence over the last year and a half from the CDC and the FDA that it makes me question the veracity of those people, and I think part of it involves what I call noble lying, that people in those institutions think that they know better how to get the population to comply with what those institutions think are promoting health behaviors, and I don't think that it's honest. I think that lying to the general population when you know the truth but think that you want to compel behavior is dishonest, and when the population finds out about that, they get extremely angry, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm. Count me as one of them, as my listeners would know. That's very powerful words that you said, and I salute you for your courage. What is your take on therapeutics such as ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and zinc?
So we have a whole package of early treatment therapeutics. We have a website, earlycovidcare.org, if I'm allowed to say that.
You are not only allowed, we're happy to promote it. Say it again.
Earlycovidcare.org, that discusses 10 or 12 of these medications and vitamins and minerals and so on. There's the evidence for them, and they're very effective. The telemedicine groups and large clinical practices across the U.S. that I've surveyed over the last year have now treated in excess of 150,000 patients with these medications. With fewer than 24 deaths that they've reported to me. That these are all COVID patients that come to them, so only a fraction of those would have been high risk. Nevertheless, this is a very, very stellar performance of these medications. It's an open secret that these telemedicine groups are doing this on the earlycovidcare.org. There's also links to a number of different sources that have links to the telemedicine groups, so people can find treatment there if they need it. It's an open secret that these things work, that the FDA has conspired to block access to generic treatment is now totally clear. The website that the FDA put up in July a year ago claiming that hydroxychloroquine is hazardous when used in outpatients, they did that with no data, no systematic data on outpatients. They say on the same website below the warning that it was based on data from hospitalized patients. Hospitalized COVID is a totally different disease. It's a pneumonia disease, whereas outpatient disease is a flu-like viral replication illness. They're different diseases. They're treated differently. And for the FDA to represent a hazard in outpatients based on data in hospitalized patients is an outright fraud. And things like that are still there today make one believe that the FDA is not acting in the interests of the American public.
But rather in the interests of?
The people, the companies that pay for its existence, which is approximately 60% of the FDA's $6 billion annual budget is paid for by pharma companies.
So I'll be back in a moment. I just want to summarize, my dear listeners. A Yale epidemiologist is accusing correctly the CDC and FDA of fraud, and he is right. And my final question will be, what does a layperson like myself do now, since I don't any longer trust the American medical profession?
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Bank transactions. The Democrats want the IRS to snoop around and check out what you're doing if you have a bank account with more than $600 in it. They want to get involved in your PayPal transactions. You're sending money to your kids. The IRS wants to know all about that. They think they can drag more money out of us. Like the IRS. And the Democrats' scheme is we got to figure a way to pay for all this crap. All this spending the Democrats want. Okay, here's the way we can do it. Let's go audit a bunch of people and let's go check out grandma sending $601 to their grandkid via PayPal. And when a reporter pointed out to Pelosi that Americans are livid about this, and is it going to stay in your reconciliation bill? Pelosi had a very predictable answer.
Yes, there are concerns that some people have, but if people are breaking the law and not paying their taxes, one way to track them is through the banking measure. I think 600, but that's a negotiation that will go on as to what the amount is. But yes.
Yes. You think a multi-millionaire like Nancy Pelosi cares about a hardworking person being tracked by the IRS? If you have a transaction over $600, yes, some people are calling the bank. You better call your bank. You got a relationship with a local banker? You better call him or her, and you better demand there be a pushback.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. It's difficult for me to overstate how much I admire my guest, Dr. Harvey Risch, epidemiologist at Yale. So, Dr. Risch, I ask with great sincerity, and having a brother who was a professor of medicine, what do I do with the decline in my ability to trust the American medical profession?
So I don't have a good answer because I have the same inability as you do. What I do is I go to the original studies and try to understand what they did and what they report and what their conclusions are. Some of those studies are in the published literature, but as we know, the medical journals today have been, in many cases, corrupted because of all of the pharma company advertising that supports those journals and supports the editors of those journals. It means that there's selective pressure to accept only certain papers and papers that put out results that are not in the interest of those companies get suppressed. And I've seen 3 or 4 papers that were accepted for publication, put up for early view on the journal's website, and then the publisher took them down because they didn't like the messages. That has nothing to do with science. So it really is a Wild West free-for-all about medical knowledge. Some papers are being published as preprints in what are called preprint servers, medRxiv, SSRN, and other servers that put up unpeer-reviewed manuscripts, and basically each person is the peer reviewer. Each person who reads it is the peer reviewer, has to decide whether the data and the report is valid. And that's where medicine is today. Everybody has to basically draw their own conclusions from the original studies because every person's got a bias, including me. I have my own scientific, thoughts about
you follow science, though. earlycovidcare.org. That is where people should go. Dr. Risch, I would like to have you on regularly, and you don't even have to say yes now, but I just want you to know.
Happy to.
Oh, wonderful. God bless you, sir. A man of science and a man of courage. So when I tell you folks that I have lost faith in the American medical establishment, I'm not alone. There are major physicians who have as well. My friends, it's the last week raising funds for the Alliance Defending Freedom. If you love freedom in this country, then you have to help the people fighting for it. And that is the lawyers at ADF, who give pro bono to people who cannot afford them. Please contribute today, last week of fundraising. The banner for the Alliance Defending Freedom is on my website, DennisPrager.com. Now at the break is a perfect time to contribute. You will help the country and you will feel better about you. The ADF banner at my website.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not.
We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Judge Thomas, you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I was under constant attack. You're not really black because you're not doing what we expect black people to do. This is the wrong black guy. He has to be destroyed.
So you'd still like to serve on the Supreme Court?
I'd rather die than withdraw from the process.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Right. So this has changed in the culture. We now have entire stadiums screaming blank Joe Biden.
Right.
I actually think that in some measure this is a sign of health in the country.
I don't think you're wrong. In fact, my last column, I talk about in essence, what the American people are feeling in terms of how they're being treated by the current administration.
Now, excuse me, by the way, I'm not saying I approve of it.
Right.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Really?
But at the same time,
we're talking about what we're observing.
It seems like a strange sign of health that we feel free enough to say that.
Well, and I don't even know that we necessarily feel free. What I would say is that the American people feel like kind of a battered spouse at this point.
Okay, you wrote an article.
And that the administration is so abusive to how they're treating people that this reaction that you're seeing, and it started out in 2 college football stadiums. It's now been in dozens to hundreds.
It's the new wave.
NFL teams had it going on this week. Talladega or NASCAR or whatever they ran had people chanting it. There is something so inherently abusive about how people are being treated
by the government.
They are, and particularly in a society that wouldn't consider itself particularly Christocentric. And it is, I am actually thankful, to your point, to see a degree of we're not going to let this abuse continue, even if it's nothing more than using our freedom of speech to say something that's very vulgar and attach it to him. We're not taking it anymore.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not. We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Want to thank Hans Zimmer for the music. wonder how many times a year I thank him, and I also wonder if there's any regularity to my thanks. Like, is it every 4 months? Because it's completely spontaneous, so I would like to know if the spontaneity has regularity. Now, let me just say this, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself. Not many people wonder if their spontaneity has regularity. Not only that, the number of people who crack themselves up asking that question is even smaller. Just for the record, thank you so much. That is correct. I acknowledge that. I like that, actually. Is there regularity to my spontaneity? My friends, if you missed the first hour and the last half hour in particular with a Yale epidemiologist, Dr. Harvey Risch, you missed a very important half hour. So you tell me, Mr. McConnell, when you have it already. I'd like you to hear the very end of my interview. This is a Yale epidemiologist. In my ability to trust the American medical profession.
So I don't have a good answer because I have the same inability as you do.
Okay, hold on. That's it. That's perfect. He has the same inability to trust the American medical profession as I do. So if you want to dismiss me as a conservative pundit, talk show host, columnist, whatever you want to call me, fine, dismiss me. How do you dismiss him? American medical establishment is composed of fraudulent cowards. Okay? Period. End of issue. They have no interest in your welfare. They have interest in money and in being sheep. That's it. That's the American Medical Association, the CDC, and the FDA. And the fact that the New York Times trusts them shows how corrupt the New York Times is. That is all it does. And I am well and healthy and had COVID 2 weeks ago, and the primary reason is that I had been taking ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and and of course zinc. And if your doctor will not prescribe this to you as a prophylactic, get rid of that doctor. He or she is a sheep. They are ignorant sheep. They don't even know what the science says. That's it. By the way, your doctor may be the kindest human you know in your life. Keep them as a friend if you like. Drop them as a doctor. I did. What's the name of the website? earlycovidcare.org. That's where you should go. earlycovidcare.org. Laura, Atlanta, Georgia, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Truly well, happily.
Thanks God.
Thank you.
So, can I just read a paragraph from a letter from a local synagogue?
Absolutely.
Great. Dear friends, we are sending this correspondence to inform you of changes to our COVID-19 policies. Moving forward, we will require in-person attendees of services, study groups, etc., to be fully vaccinated. Exceptions to this policy will be extended only to 1, individuals whose physicians have advised against receiving the vaccine with such advice evidenced in writing, and 2, children under 12 years old until such time as they can be fully vaccinated pursuant to FDA authorization and CDC recommendation guidelines.
What's the name? I don't care if you tell me. What is the name of your synagogue?
It's not mine. It's AA Synagogue, Atlanta, Georgia. It's conservative. A friend sent it to me.
What is AA? What is that? Agudat Achim? What does AA stand for?
No, it's Ahavat Achim.
Ahavat Achim. Love of brothers. I see. Right. So there are a bunch of sheep at that synagogue. Not surprising. Most churches and synagogues are composed of sheep. they take religion as seriously as atheists do. Because if they took religion seriously, they wouldn't march to the beat of the secular drummers of our society. So this is a fraud. This is a farce. What they just sent out. Why are you a member of the synagogue?
No.
All right. Well, have your friend who is a member and sent you the letter. Have your friend ask them, what if I had COVID? Why do I need to be vaccinated? And get an answer. I want an answer in writing. I'll announce it on the air. By the way, I invite anybody from that synagogue to come on my show. I'll interview you in Hebrew if you like.
Well, what's implied here, that I realize what's implied, because they said under 12, which means over 12.
No, it means that once the FDA says under 12, these sheep at this synagogue will go under 12 and hurt
Correct.
children.
That means over 12 right now, they're requiring a vaccine.
That's right. That's exactly what it means. That is exactly right. But I'm serious. I want them to ask, what if I have natural immunity, which is way, way stronger, and they could give any number of studies to show it, including from Israel. Not that the synagogue may give a damn about Israel, but many synagogues don't anymore. But it doesn't matter. It's still, Israel has prestige in the world of science. And they have come out with that study.
We don't have much time, but I also saw a flyer that's going around in the New York and Lakewood areas. Biden money is supposedly going to these organizations, religious organizations, to promote the vaccine
Right. Well, that I don't know anything about. Nothing would surprise me. Biden is as corrupt, the most corrupt president we've ever had. So nothing would surprise me. Anyway, I thank you for that news. The embarrassment that I have as a religious person at the sheep-like behavior of churches and synagogues is very deep. It shows you that religion has no effect on many religious people. This is not news, but it is still nevertheless disturbing. Having said that, a disproportionate number of those who have not acted like sheep are indeed religious people, Christians and Jews. The ultra-Orthodox Jews and the evangelical Christians are those examples that come to my mind. Yes, indeed. Yes. Tim in Tampa, Florida. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Dennis. How can the FDA be corrupt if everything they do is presented in a public session? And you could go, and if you've got evidence they're corrupt, you could present it, and Harvey Risch could talk. And if everybody has
Harvey Risch was removed from YouTube.
Well, you know,
Harvey Risch was removed from YouTube. Please respond to my response.
It's got nothing to do with the FDA. It's got nothing to do with the FDA.
No. It has to do with America. It has to do with you can't be heard in America if you differ with the FDA.
FDA can.
You can't be heard. Okay. Yes,
open.
It's all open. Exactly. Okay. I thank you for calling. That's it. Clarity over agreement. It's all open, according to Tim in Tampa. It's all closed, according to Dennis in Los Angeles. One of us is wrong, okay? There's free speech for people who differ with the FDA. Wow, that's a new one. We live in a different country, Tim and I. I love Tampa. Maybe it's true. Maybe Tampa is open, intellectually open. Kathy, Chicago, hello.
Hi, Dennis. How are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want you to know that everybody that I tell my story to thinks I'm crazy, including the medical community. I make it a point every time I go to the hospital with my parents for other issues to tell all the medical staff my story, and they all tell me, well, read the science, read the reports, which I've read over 100 studies. And my family, my husband and I, 64 years old. I'm a former smoker. My husband's healthy. We took all the therapeutics. Z-Pak, hydroxy, ivermectin, budesonide, and we're fine. My parents, 83 and 85. My mother has 5 comorbidities. They both survived COVID on the therapeutics. And the woman that gave me COVID passed away, sadly, but she was morbidly obese and was diabetic.
Well, the doctors who tell you to read the studies didn't read many studies. Back in a moment.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
It occurs that today, when we're talking, 22 of the 25 ranked colleges in national football by the AP are in red states: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. And in some of those 25 that are in purple states, like Penn State, are in the red part of the purple state. Only Oregon and San Diego State are in blue states. Do you have a theory? I do, as to why college football succeeds in red states far beyond the way it succeeds in blue states today?
Well, I think it represents this. It doesn't, and it's unlike pro football, which has become performance woke art. I think a lot of people in these places incorporate going out to a Saturday football game as in the same sense as 4th of July or standing for the national anthem or singing God Bless America. It's a festive public ritual for red state America, and in a way that pro sports used to be, but now the NBA or the NFL, even Major League Baseball, has forfeited that. It's become a Hollywood-centric or celebrity-centric or New York-centric sport. So I think and actually their popularity is increasing as a result that people innately like sports, but they're shifting from pro sports, I think, to what you talk about.
Well, I also want to add to your assessment. When you think about this, the red states are least amenable to woke college politics.
You're generally correct, because especially the Board of Regents or the overseers, they come from business, they come from all walks of life, and they just don't put up with it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
It's not just about saying I have a right in this country to not have the government not allow me to go to church, but also that the government cannot compel me to participate in any sort of event, including a vaccine, by the way, that goes against my sincerely held religious beliefs. And so it should just be a matter of course that if you have a conscious objection, then you can say, I, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as any sort of religion. I mean, this covers all religions, by the way, all faiths, all sincerely held beliefs. You should be able to say, I decline to be coerced into participation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of employers are not only requiring a lot of information for people to say, well, you have to justify your religious exemption. We're also seeing that they want this so-called, what they're calling an interactive process. That's basically an interrogation. I have clients right now that they have filed for a religious exemption on the basis of we're pro-life, that's what the Bible teaches, and I cannot take this vaccine. And the Human Resources Department, from the legal counsel of these employers, want to sit down and basically interrogate them and say, is this really a sincerely held religious belief? And they're using this as a pretext to try to deny religious exemptions. It's absurd, and I hope that when there are more lawsuits filed, like just today, in Texas, United Airlines was forbidden from enforcing their vaccine mandate against employees who are claiming a religious exemption. So we're already seeing that the courts are protecting this, but hopefully it'll be more than just Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
want to remind you, final 5 days raising funds for one of the great organizations of this country, the Alliance Defending Freedom. They're asking for $100. Obviously, if you can't afford $100, give less. They're still very grateful, and so am I. But I'm telling you, you can't give nothing. So I know it's a little aggressive of me to say that to you, but it's not money going to me. I'm contributing. They defend freedom in the courts of this country. There's a banner for ADF. Click on it now at DennisPrager.com. I'll give you a moment to do so. I will hum. That was Mozart. Not really, really well done, but well done enough. I would say medium well. I would say it was medium well. The banner is at DennisPrager.com for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Or just call 855-649-2020. 855-649-2020. DP here, my friends. DP, yes. If you missed the interview with the epidemiologist from Yale, Dr. Harvey Risch, it's an example of why you should subscribe to Pragertopia and get every show you want without commercials. Pragertopia.com. Then you could send it to friends. People say, oh, you listen to this guy, Prager, oh, you're right winger. So tell them, say to them, okay, here's 3 shows, randomly chosen. What did he say that's wrong? What did he say that's false? In nearly 40 years, I've never been accused of lying. Even by the people who want me dead, like the Washington Post readers. They had an anti-Dennis Prager piece in the Washington Post last week, and you should have seen the comments. By the way, you may wonder, does it bother me? It does, but it doesn't bother me for me at all. Absolutely not at all. It bothers me for the country that the Washington Post has such scum reading its newspaper. They should be embarrassed at the Washington Post that these are the level of their readers. Okie dokie, everybody. Okie dokie. Let's see here. Julie in Cleveland, the famous Julie of Cleveland. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
So I want to just preface my my call with saying that I am in total agreement that it's such a big crime that hydroxychloroquine and all these other therapeutics were not.
Crime is the word, by the way. Crime is the word. A lot of Americans are dead because of the medical profession, because of Fauci, 100%. The FDA, and the CDC. Dead. A lot of these Americans are dead solely because of their opposition to things that could help people. The New York Times is a complicit party to the killing of Americans. Go ahead.
I agree with that. I just want to also emphasize, though, that the Regeneron monoclonal antibody infusion is also very helpful.
Very helpful, and the earlier you get it, the more it helps. My mother-in-law just had COVID. Everybody in my house had it. She's living with us. She's 80 years old, and she's fine.
So I just want to, I just want to put it out there.
Yes, people should get it. The monoclonal infusion, that is correct. Or Regeneron, that is exactly right. Where antibodies are injected into you. Why the first thing you would do is get a vaccine that is experimental? I'm not against measles vaccines. It's this thing, anti-vaxxer is typical of the left. They don't deal with arguments. They just smear. It's all they've done my whole life. I've watched it happen. Yep. 1-8 Prager 776. So I was reading to you. The emerging science suggests that natural immunity is as good or better than vaccine-induced immunity. This is the Washington Post. I must admit, I find it amazing that they published it. A professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, Marty McCary. We should have him on too. Frankly, I would have a doctor a day on to show what herd and sheep most doctors in this country are. It's so frustrating that the Biden administration has repeatedly argued that immunity conferred by vaccines is preferable to immunity caused by natural infection. As NIH Director Francis Collins told Fox News host Brett Baer a few weeks ago, that rigid adherence to an outdated theory is also reflected in President Biden's recent announcement that large companies must require their employees to get vaccinated or submit to regular testing regardless of whether they previously had the virus. When asked the common question, I've recovered from COVID, is it absolutely essential that I get vaccinated? Many public health officials have put aside the data. I guess Marty McCary's another right-winger, even though he's a professor at Johns Hopkins Medical School. Many public health officials have put aside the data and responded with a synchronized, I love that, synchronized, that's perfect. A synchronized yes. Even as studies have shown that reinfections are rare and often asymptomatic or mild when they do occur. The incorrect hypothesis that natural immunity is unreliable has resulted in the loss of thousands of American lives. You hear that? Avoidable vaccine complications and damaged the credibility of public health officials. This is from a professor at Johns Hopkins Medical School. My first question, if I had Dr. Risch on again, or this doctor, how do your colleagues react to you? What I'm really asking is, how do the sheep who constitute the American medical profession react to you? Given the recent mandate announcement by the White House, it would be good for our public health leaders to show humility by acknowledging that the hypothesis they repeatedly trumpeted was not only wrong, but it may be harmful. Those of you who answer this with follow the science are lying to yourselves. You mean follow the scientists with whom you agree. We shall return.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Larry Sabato from the Virginia Center of Politics, and he said, for all the talk about the 2022 midterms, really what we need to be focused on is a 2021 midterm. That occurs November 2nd in Virginia.
Now, what occurs to me that is a great tell is President Biden is not coming to help out Terry McAuliffe. They're bringing in former President Obama to try and generate some enthusiasm without setting you up one way or the other. How do you cover critical race theory? Because it's become the central issue in Virginia. What do you say about it?
Well, critical race theory has become the proxy for the school district fight in Virginia and who should control what children are taught. And you have some of the largest and most liberal school districts in the country in Virginia. You also have some of the more conservative school districts in Virginia. And what I thought was key, and obviously you've played this soundbite a lot, is the Yunkan-Mcauliffe debate, which goes to show you why real debates and real news, especially in politics, are important and actually sometimes elicit the most interesting things, where Terry McAuliffe essentially said that parents should not have a say in what their children are taught, whether it relates to critical race theory, whether it relates to gender studies, whether it relates to transsexual issues, whatever it is. Terry McAuliffe thinks the school boards and the teachers unions know better. That's a perfectly legitimate political argument. What was interesting was he actually said the quiet part out loud. He said the thing that Democrats rarely, if ever, admit, which is they don't want parents' input if it disagrees with their worldview, and the parents shouldn't really have a say. Once he said that, and I think you would acknowledge, that's really when the race changed.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Right? So this has changed in the culture. We now have entire stadiums screaming blank Joe Biden.
Right.
I actually think that in some measure, this is a sign of health in the country.
I don't think you're wrong. In fact, my last column, I talk about in essence, what the American people are feeling in terms of how they're being treated by the current administration.
Now, excuse me, by the way, I'm not saying I approve of it.
Right.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Clearly.
But
No,
at the same time,
we're talking about what we're observing.
It seems like a strange sign of health that we feel free enough to say that.
Well, and I don't even know that we necessarily feel free. What I would say is that the American people feel like kind of a battered spouse at this point.
Okay, you wrote an article.
And that the administration is so abusive to how they're treating people that this reaction that you're seeing, and it started out in 2 college football stadiums. It's now been in dozens to hundreds.
It's the new wave.
NFL teams had it going on this week. Talladega or NASCAR or whatever they ran had people chanting it. There is something so inherently abusive about how people are being treated
by the government.
They are, and particularly in a society that wouldn't consider itself particularly Christocentric. And it is, I am actually thankful, to your point, to see a degree of we're not going to let this abuse continue, even if it's nothing more than using our freedom of speech to say something that's very vulgar and attach it to him. We're not taking it anymore.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Well, I'm on now with a great man, Stephen Moore, economist for FreedomWorks, a free market-oriented think tank. His most recent PragerU video of 2 weeks ago is The Bankrupting of America. I probably didn't have you on then because, Steve, I had COVID.
Well, I hope you're better. We missed you.
I am not only better, I am better than better, because now I have natural immunity. So I am very happy to have you on and to tell you that. Anyway, the latest, have you seen the latest? Literally the latest, I just saw it this morning, with regard to Chicago and Mayor Lightfoot announcing that they will pay, what is it, $500 a month to selected poor people in Chicago?
Did see that story, and I'm from Chicago, Dennis, and it breaks my heart that kind of policy in place in the way once was one of the great cities in the world. It's being destroyed. We are.
What happened? Why does this happen, Sean, so often? What happened to my guest? My friends, the rubber bands that keep the station together are sometimes snap. I don't know what happened. What happened to my guest? Why, if I talk to people on the phone the rest of the day, does this never happen? And then I do on the radio with all of this equipment, and it keeps happening. It is spooky. There are racist overtones to what is happening. And we'll get back to Steve Moore in a moment. It really is bizarre to me. And I apologize to you, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm at least as annoyed as you are in any event. All right, we'll get him back. So where is the Chicago piece? Did you send it to me? Did you bring it in? Or was it sent to me? I know that, but I want to read the piece to the public and to Stephen Moore. Here we go.
Hello.
All right. I don't know what happened. Do you know what happened? Steve.
Hey, Steve Moore.
Yeah, I know. Do you know what happened?
I don't know what happened.
Okay, you don't either. All right, fair enough. Chicago poised, here it is, Washington Post. Chicago poised to create one of the nation's largest, quote, guaranteed basic income, unquote, programs. Chicago City Council is poised to vote this week on what would be one of the nation's largest basic income programs, giving 5,000 low-income households $500 per month each, using federal funding from the pandemic stimulus package enacted this year. So you're from Chicago. What do you say?
It's outrageous. I think what we're doing is paying people not to work, and that's at the city level, it's at the state level, and obviously at the federal level. If we pass this, it inspired me to do that Prager called Bankrupting of America. We're up to $2 million. Get to 10 million, by the way. I want every American to watch this because we're estimating that we will have 8 million fewer Americans working if we pass that because of all of the payments. You know, for everything is free. Everything is free. Daycare is free. Kindergarten is free. We're going to pay people $300 a month per child. We're going to, if you can't pay your student loans, well, the government's going to pay it for you. If you can't pay your rent, the government's going to pay it for you. We have $75,000 to $80,000 cash equivalent without working one single hour from collecting all of these government benefits.
So I see this as the famous ancient problem when people realize they can vote for people who will give them money.
Right.
That ends democracy as we know it.
You know, that is the ancient Chinese proverb, and we are moving in that direction. But, you know, I have faith in American people. I think we don't have this socialism in our DNA. I think the American people will reject it. We believe in a social safety net. We believe in people giving people a second chance. And everybody, look, I've lost a job before, and we have, you know, programs to help people. But the idea that you can basically live on welfare, and in many cases earn more money than you could on the job, that's a recipe for disaster.
That's right. We'll be back in a moment with Stephen Moore. Watch this video at PragerU, by the way. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384. The reason you hear so many ads for Relief Factor, not only on my show, but elsewhere, is because it works. As a general rule, a great many ads means people have responded to the ads. Otherwise, they couldn't afford another ad, right? It's a given. Well, it does work. And they have a very honest policy. If it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it probably won't work. This is from the makers of the product, the doctors who make it. So try it for 3 weeks for $19.95 at ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Freedom Works, free market-oriented think tank, and he has a very recent PragerU video, The Bankrupting of America. So we were talking about the ancient Chinese, it's probably ancient in every society, observation that when people realize that they could vote people into office who will give them free money, that is sort of the beginning of the end of a democracy. Your response in part is that the American DNA rejects that. I don't know if the American DNA has been changed. I think we received a socialist vaccination that seems to be working with many people who go to college. Anyway, I have a few more questions. One is about the $2 trillion versus $3.5 trillion bill, measure. Right. So is it simply a difference in level of horror, or is it a meaningful difference?
Not much. I mean, all they're doing is they're using phony baloney, fake accounting to try to shrink the price tag of this, because Americans are horrified by this price tag. And let's not forget, Dennis, remember at the beginning of the year, Biden passed a $2 trillion what I call the blue state bailout, bailing out California and Illinois and New York and New Jersey because they shut down their economies. Now we know, incidentally, what the states and cities are using that money for. When you mentioned Chicago's going to take federal money and pay out $500, for every poor person in the city. Why don't they use that money to hire police? By the way, the crime rate is out of control in Chicago. It just shows the perverted priorities of many Democrats. But so we had $1 trillion at the beginning of the year that we couldn't afford. Then we had $1 trillion for the sham infrastructure bill, which is really just a Green New Deal bill. And then they have $3.5 trillion for the social welfare spending bill. And that's on, and people get confused. That's on top of the $6 trillion annual budget. Dennis, so you add that up, you're talking about 10, 11, $12 trillion of spending in 1 year. We've never seen anything like this. One of the points I make in the Prager U video that I think is really important for people to understand. Normally in the United States, throughout our history, from the Revolutionary War through this pandemic, when we have a crisis, we borrow money, right? We borrow money to finance the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, et cetera, even the Cold War and the Great Depression. But once the crisis is over, then we start to actually pay down the debt. This is the first time in American history that Joe Biden is proposing a massive multi-trillion-dollar spending blowout, and the crisis is over. This isn't about stimulating the economy. It is a radical Marxist redistribution of income in the United States that is going to make everyone poor.
That's right. That's right. That's what it is. So why has Joe Manchin signed on?
Oh gosh, I mean, Joe, it's a scary situation when the fate of the Western world depends on the shoulders of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. They've been hanging tough, but the rumors are, as we speak, that they're ready to make a deal with Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, Bernie Sanders is the one who's basically written this bill. Joe Biden lied to us. Remember, Dennis, during the campaign, he said, "I'll be the president, not Bernie Sanders," and yet Bernie Sanders is the one who seems to be directing the agenda of the Democratic Party. I just pray that we have some. Isn't it sad, Dennis, that out of 256 Democrats in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, only 2 of them have spoken out in resistance to the most economically ruinous bill in American history?
Well, as I point out to liberals, when you vote Democrat, you are voting left, not liberal, but it makes no impact. The destruction of the country, including its economy. So I just want to understand if it's even actually true. You said it's phony baloney accounting, so maybe it's not true. What has been dropped between the $3.5 trillion and the $2 trillion bills?
Well, there's things that are dropping out every day, which is good. I mean, we're moving in the right direction. I'm running a coalition of about 80 major conservative groups that oppose this bill, and it includes right to work groups, right to life groups, Second Amendment groups, libertarian groups. I mean, if you're a conservative, there's something in this bill that you're going to hate. So they have dropped out, apparently, because this stuff is all going to be written in the 11th hour when they actually write the legislation, which, by the way, no one is going to read in Congress. They did take out the Green New Deal stuff because Joe Manchin represents West Virginia, which is a state that produces a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of coal and natural gas. Kristen Sinema of Arizona, who's been a hero so far, she has said she does not believe that these massive tax increases are in our economic interest. I agree with her. As you know, I helped write the Trump tax cuts. Those were a phenomenal success. What is the point of having an experiment on taxes? We did the experiment. We created the best economy ever, and Democrats still want to repeal it.
Well, because they don't want to build the country. They want to tear it down. I mean, the answer is so self-evident that it's hard. That it's actually hard to believe because it is so self-evident. Can you explain to me why we're having such problems getting things transported into the country?
Yeah, easily. We don't have workers. There's 100,000 truck drivers, truck driver positions that are open. We don't have the workers for that.
And why don't we?
Well, because people are getting paid. Being a truck driver is a tough job. I salute the people who are the delivery people who drive these trucks and the 14-wheelers. That's a tough job. And if you could make $75,000 or $80,000 sitting at home watching Netflix, come on, people are gonna not work. And again, I think we made a big mistake. We should have cut the payroll tax last year to help the people who are working, the heroes of the economy, are the nurses, the truck drivers, the delivery people, the doctors, the people working in grocery stores who kept working. Instead, this is what government does. What did we do? We rewarded people who went on unemployment benefits, and we gave them extra benefits. And that's not fair. It's not fair for people on unemployment benefits to get more money than people who are working.
That's right. Hold on there, please. Stephen Moore. Watch his recent video at PragerU.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not.
We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
You ever thought of going to seminary?
Billy Graham.
Gloria a Dios, hermano. ¿Quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Speaking with economist Stephen Moore, who is a font of clarity. That's why we had him do PragerU video with millions of views on the Bankrupting of America. So let me understand, because I don't fully understand. Truck drivers now in the United States of America are still being paid not to work?
They sure are. I mean, by the way, I just have to say this as an aside. I wrote a book called It's Getting Better All the Time. So that's one of my favorite Beatles songs. So I'm glad. I don't know if you played that one for me, but it is a...
Oh, perfect. Yes, I played it for you.
So we are paying people the benefits for, if you get the whole array of benefits that the government's providing, rental assistance, food stamps, $300 per child. You got 3 kids, that's $900 a month for just free money. I call it helicopter money. All of these things, and then the expanded unemployment benefits. You can make $75,000, $80,000 a year and not work a single hour. Casey Mulligan is the economist at the University of Chicago, has shown that these benefits are so high. And incidentally, it was a bipartisan victory in 1996 when Bill Clinton, a Democrat, was president, when we passed welfare reform, when we said, look, you're going to have to work to get benefits, we're going to have time limits, you're going to have to either get training or educated or be on a job. And it worked. We cut the welfare caseloads by half. That was Newt Gingrich, and I'll give credit to Bill Clinton for signing that bill. And now the Democrats now don't believe in welfare reform. They want people on welfare. They want people to collect these government benefits. And maybe, as you said, it's because they want people to be dependent on government.
I'm quiet because it's mind-boggling. We have such terrible problems now of getting goods into the country. And you're telling me in large measure because truck drivers are being paid not to drive trucks.
It's not just truck drivers. We don't have enough people working on the docks. And by the way, the dock workers union has control over those docks. They should be working 24/7 around the clock. If you go to a FedEx facility, Dennis, or you go to a UPS, or you go to Amazon facility, they're working around the clock to get these goods and services out. But the unions are not allowing that, so everything is getting stocked up. I talked to a congressman this morning who actually has a auto dealership in Dallas. He told me, Dennis, normally he has about 800 to 1,000 cars and trucks on his lot. You know how many he has right now?
Go ahead.
14.
Oh, my God. Stephen Moore, I need you on more often. I want to talk to you next time about inflation. Inflation is a very big evil. Watch his video, The Bankrupting of America, up at PragerU.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Bank transactions. The Democrats want the IRS to snoop around and check out what you're doing if you have a bank account with more than $600 in it. They want to get involved in your PayPal transactions. You're sending money to your kids. The IRS wants to know all about that. They think they can drag more money out of us. Like the IRS. And the Democrats' scheme is we got to figure a way to pay for all this crap. All this spending the Democrats want. Okay, here's the way we can do it. Let's go audit a bunch of people and let's go check out grandma sending $601 to their grandkid via PayPal. And when a reporter pointed out to Pelosi that Americans are livid about this, and is it going to stay in your reconciliation bill? Pelosi had a very predictable answer.
Yes, there are concerns that some people have, but if people are breaking the law and not paying their taxes, one way to track them is through the banking measure. I think 600, but that's a negotiation that will go on as to what the amount is. But yes.
Yes. You think a multi-millionaire like Nancy Pelosi cares about a hardworking person being tracked by the IRS? If you have a transaction over $600, yes, some people are calling the bank you better call your bank. You got a relationship with a local banker? You better call him or her, and you better demand there be a pushback.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
When there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups, who gets preference? Who wins? Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy. Not any different than a hierarchy that you would have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else. I wrote a piece for humanevents.com where I wrote, it was literally called, "This Matters More Than That." Now, a great example of this is when Fauci, the lockdown artist, the anti-freedom activist, mad scientist, who is the best example of the technological and scientific elite that the left worships. When he was even confronted by a talk show host where they asked Fauci, they said, "So do you think that young people should stop hooking up via Tinder and basically having very promiscuous relationships?" And Fauci said, "Well, you have to understand there's some risk to that." He didn't denounce it because he understood that if he came out against promiscuous behavior for young people, there'd be a revolution.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
When I started teaching, I was only 25. I was only 7 years older than my students. That's not a great span of time for between a man and a young woman, and it is a daily distraction.
That's right. It is. I thank you for your honesty. That is exactly right, and it is not his fault. He's built that way. It's no more his fault than food is a distraction to the hungry. Okay? There is no difference between the two. So I'll tell you an interesting story, really interesting. Many years ago, and I can't find this on the internet, maybe one of you can, and that would be of great help to me. I only remember that he was from a university in Indiana, but I don't remember which university. What did it say, Sean? So a professor did a study and found that one of the two groups, I don't remember the second, of men most likely to divorce were high school teachers. And I think college teachers. In other words, men around a great number of young women divorced at a greater rate than any other men. And I had that professor on with that study. So if you could find that, I could read it to you.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Show every Tuesday, the third hour is devoted to some great issue of life. It was a gamble when I started it. I didn't know if this would be popular. It turns out to have been wildly popular, as it should be, because it's precisely on the ultimate issues that people are not taught and therefore do not get wisdom. One way of looking at this hour is it's about wisdom. Wisdom is not taught at our schools any longer, and you now see the results. On some occasions, I have an author on during the Ultimate Issues Hour. This is one of those occasions. The author is the famous, to some infamous, Eric Metaxas. Eric Metaxas is a unique individual, and the challenge whenever I am publicly with Eric Metaxas is not to start laughing, because we have a very good time together. I will add that his book is Atheism Dead, which is self-recommending, A, because Eric Metaxas wrote it, and B, because of the subject, and C, I just might add that the first blurb is from Dennis Prager. Are you aware of that, Eric? Were you aware that they did that?
Of course I was aware that they did that. I would have really preferred someone that I like, but you know what? You take life as it is. What are you going to do?
Yes, that's why I asked. I knew it would cause you some degree of heartburn. Seeing my blurb.
It is a joy to have your name associated with my book, my friend, and thank you for having me on the program to talk about what's in the book. It is important. Ultimate issues are ultimate issues. Sometimes they call them first things. Sometimes they call them ultimate things. Either way, you have to understand why we're on the planet. Is there a God? You have to at least ask those questions with honesty, and we live in a culture that tends not to do that, which is one of the reasons I'm a fan of you and your show. So thanks for having me on.
It's as you know, it's always a joy. When did I just saw you recently? Where was it? We were just together, right?
I think it was a lineup in the San Marino County Jail. I was the third guy from the left.
Oh, okay. I knew it, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to jump to a conclusion.
I always forget where I saw you. Where did I say? Oh, Chattanooga.
That's it. We were together in Chattanooga. What a great time! What a great church.
I have to say, many people have told me that that's one of the best videos they've seen in a long time. Your conversation with me and the pastor of the church there really was, I hope people can find it. I posted it many places, but it was wonderful because we talked about ultimate issues, yeah.
That's exactly right. So I'm if you didn't see this particular article, I know you're familiar with the general statement, but just yesterday, I think it was, yet another piece. And it was, you'll find this fascinating. So the piece was, and I don't remember the source, but it's some mainstream medium, and it was about how many young people are turned off by church because the church is not committed enough to immigration, diversity, equity, LGBTQ, etc. Because as we know, so few young people go to church, and this was the reason given. The church is out of step with society. Your reaction?
Well, that's for the same reason that I'm turned off to math, because I got so many questions wrong, and I thought, this is unacceptable. I'm going to go to the humanities. It's very simple. I don't like it. Look, it gets preposterous. If you want to make sure that there are people in your building, in your church or your synagogue, the last thing you should do is worry about what the 15-year-olds think. It is your job to teach them what to think and how to think. And the reason we're in the place we are, in the culture and in churches in America, is because of this kind of thinking. And I don't need to tell you, it came into the culture in a big way basically in the 60s, when every parent was trying to be hip like their kid. Before that in history, in every culture in the world, kids wanted to dress and be like an adult, like their parents. That flipped in the 60s. A lot flipped in the 60s. And that's at the heart of my book, Is Atheism Dead? Because it refers to the Time magazine article in 1966, Is God Dead? There was a flip in the culture where mostly the cultural elites, the Marxist-leaning cultural elites, decided that it seems like science has pushed God out of the picture. We can live in a secular utopia. And that led really to everything. And Solzhenitsyn, of course, famously said, if you ask what happened in the Soviet Union, the horrors, it's because men have forgotten God. Well, that happened in America starting in the 60s, and we are now bearing the horrific fruit of that. And the reason I wrote the book, Is Atheism Dead? Is because, in my opinion, since the 60s, ironically, the tide has turned. The evidence has come in very dramatically. And the only difficult thing is that most of us haven't heard it because the secular narrative reigns and most people don't report on this kind of stuff. So this book is evidence from science and archaeology and philosophy and history. And to me, it's an open and shut case. The idea that there is no God is no longer intellectually even tenable. If you want to say you're an agnostic, that's fine. Let's have a conversation. But it seems to me that things have flipped dramatically since the 60s, and, you know, we were due for a correction or we were headed for the eternal abyss, which is pretty much a bad thing.
So you'll find this fascinating, Eric. Eric Metaxas's book is Atheism Dead, just published, and it is up at DennisPrager.com. I had Charles Krauthammer on the show. He was a secular individual, and I never asked him about politics, neither in person nor on my show, because everybody knew his political views. I just asked him about everything else, including this question I posed to him. Of course, he's passed away tragically. I asked him what he thought of atheism, and I had no idea what he would say. See, what do you say? Isn't that interesting, Eric?
Well, listen, if you're smart and brave, you don't need to be that brave, but you need to be willing to look at the reality. Atheism quickly becomes preposterous. You rule it out because you don't want to look foolish. Now, there are all kinds of questions about God. Who is God? What is God like? How do we know there's a God? You could say anything. You could say, well, I believe in the Aristotelian God. I don't believe in the God of the Bible. That's fine. But to say there is no God, to ask, is God dead, that, when you look at the facts, becomes preposterous. And I think we have to make that case much more strongly because, listen, in my book, if you're an honest atheist, if you're really trying to think this through, in my book, Is Atheism Dead? The first part's about scientific evidence. The second part's about archaeological evidence. And the third part is about atheism and atheists. And in that part of the book, I say, if you were really wrestling with the idea of maybe we live in a world with no God, we're alone in the universe and there's no meaning, if you do that seriously, I can respect you, because Camus and Sartre and others, they were really troubled by this, and they were looking into it. Now, ironically, those two men, and almost nobody knows this, that's why I feel like this is headline news in the last part of my book, both of them came to faith in God. No, virtually no one knows that, and I thought it's because of the secular narrative established in the 60s that we bat away information like that. We tend not to take it seriously.
You're right, by the way. I did not know that, Eric. We're going to come back to that when we come back from the break. That's fascinating. Is atheism dead, Eric Metaxas? As I write in my blurb, which is on the back of the jacket of the book. Whatever Eric Metaxas writes, I read. So, this is another one. Back in a moment.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
Our lunch consisted of whatever my mother could scrape together from the dinner the night before. We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO. Put in an economic growth plan called 999.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Burka.
He is America. Captain America's trying, but nah, not so much. It's Superman. That's why kids have loved him. Adults have loved. When I saw Superman, I was, 8 years old, and I saw Christopher Reeve. You believed a man could fly. And I wanted to be an American, and now I am. But but they've killed it. They killed James Bond in the new movie. Sorry, guys, spoilers. I've seen it. It's crap. Don't waste your time. They killed James Bond. Dead. Gone. Because I guess what? He was too sexy? Too toxic in his masculinity? Gone!
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
All right, before I return Eric Metaxas and his brand new book is Atheism Dead, I want to remind you of a magnificent organization in the United States, the Job Creators Network at jobcreatorsnetwork.com. They are the people who fight for small businesses in this country. There is a war on small business because there is a war on everything that is good in this country. So if you want to help, and I don't even mean to send funds, just let them know you exist and you support them. That's all this is about. JobCreatorsNetwork.com, JCN.com is another way of going to it. I am a big supporter of this group. I know the leaders. They're fantastic. So go to JobCreatorsNetwork.com. This is not a request for money. It is a request for you. Eric Metaxas, the very important writer and broadcaster, has just published his Atheism Dead. And I will acknowledge that I did not know what you reported, that Camus and Sartre, two of the biggest names, if not the two biggest names of 20th century French secular thought, turned out to be believers at the end. What's your evidence?
Well, imagine how shocked I was, Dennis. I mean, the book, I came up with the title. It was like about at the beginning of COVID. I thought I have this evidence from science and evidence from archaeology, which I can go into. And I thought it's about time somebody wrote a book with this stuff in it, because most people, including people of faith, have no idea of the discovery of biblical Sodom, of tons of archaeology. They have no idea about the scientific evidence, that life could not have emerged out of non-life by random churning of the primordial soup. There's all this stuff. And I thought, well, and if I do use the title, Is Atheism Dead? I guess I have to deal with, the new atheism and atheists and stuff. So as I was doing my reading, I came upon the evidence, the story, that Jean-Paul Sartre, at the end of his life in the 1970s, I guess was living with a younger man, was helping him, and the younger man, I don't know if he was a Jewish believer or some kind of a Christian. I think he was just a Jewish believer in God, like you, and he began getting Sartre to think about this stuff. And what's fascinating to me is that at some point, if you look seriously at atheism, if you're flippant and silly and shallow, as the new atheists have been, you will never arrive at anything. You're just trying to sell books and trying to get applause for your position. But if you're serious the way Sartre was and the way Camus was, and you're saying that, listen, we are philosophers, we're trying to create a system of ethics, we believe we're alone in the universe without God. How do you do that? How do you say how we should live, or whether we should live? Why don't we kill ourselves? Why don't we, they were wrestling with those issues. So Camus, at the end of his life, made a few statements that he clearly had come to believe that there is a God, that there's just no doubt from the evidence and so on and so forth. And it infuriated, his close friends. What's her name? Simone
Beauvoir. Beauvoir.
I guess it was. Infuriated. They were just outraged that he would say these things. They said he's going senile and whatever. It's obvious that he wasn't, that at the end of his life he really was able to focus. But I think it's because he looked so seriously at it. In other words, if you don't look seriously, you're just playing games like a lot of the people who say they're atheists today. They haven't thought this stuff through, and they haven't looked into the bleak abyss of a world without meaning. They don't even live like it's true. You can't live like it's true. There's no such thing as beauty or love or anything transcendent. There's no meaning. Nobody lives like that. And so some serious people like Camus eventually get through to the other side. And there was some, I write in the book that there's a plausible report that before he died, he officially entered into the Catholic Church. That now I don't know for a fact, and of course I'm not a Catholic, but there's no doubt that he came to believe that there was a God. He infuriated his atheist colleagues. And when I read this, you can imagine, I thought, how have I never heard this? His books are still available in every Barnes & Noble. People are reading this bleak stuff in universities for the last 60, 70 years. What's going on? Well, that happened, and nobody seemed to talk about it because they bought into this narrative, and we're not interested if this old guy comes to some kind of faith, and hardly anybody wrote about it. But the Camus story is even stranger, because you think, well, it's one thing for Sartre to come to faith, but you're telling me Albert Camus, the other famous French existentialist, he also came to faith. And that, I can't remember the title of the book that I was reading, and I really should remember it, but it mentioned both of these briefly. So I looked into the sources, and it turns out that Camus, at the end of his life, and he was killed very young, 47, in a car crash, but in his 40s, he began to see the end of his philosophy. He was not happy with it. And he shows up at a church in France, an American church in France. He showed up to hear the organist, who was famous. And the organist played 4 weeks in a row, but there was a guest preacher from the United States, a fairly theologically liberal Protestant mainline preacher. In those days, they actually believed in God and the Bible. And so he grabs this guy, Camus. He says, I want to have lunch with you. I want to talk about this. And they have many, many long, long conversations. This guy doesn't come back to Europe for a few years, and it resumes. Camus is asking... Now, by the way, Camus read the Bible many times over. Many times. He started with the Pentateuch, which you probably don't know is the first 5 books of the Bible. And he read it over and over, probably many more times than this liberal mainline Protestant who went to Yale Div School or whatever. And in 1959, I think, or at 60, I can't remember the last time he was there, he asked this man, would you baptize me? I'm ready. I want this. And the guy kind of sloughed it off and said, well, you were baptized as a kid, and I don't know if you want to do that again. And it got a little complicated, and he ended up not doing it, and a couple of months later, Camus was killed in a car crash. And I thought to myself, the world doesn't know this, and one of the reasons the world doesn't know that is because this pastor didn't write about this until the year 2001. So he was 90 or 91 years old when he chose finally to put this very fascinating story in a book, and it's very detailed. He must have kept notes or something.
That's truly fascinating. We're going to be back in a moment. The book is Atheism Dead? The author Eric Metaxas.
The only time you can come to Christ.
You ever thought of going to seminary?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business districts.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
We understand that a plane has crashed into...
The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Biggest and most costly manhunt in U.S. history.
United States killed Osama bin Laden.
There are reports surfacing that Al-Qaeda has placed a $50,000 US bounty on the heads of any U.S. Navy SEALs.
Nobody's going to survive that. There's nobody in that.
This is the single largest loss of life in Afghanistan in a single incident.
Most of them are U.S. Navy SEALs.
We discovered bullets in the bodies of the Navy SEAls. The military threw them away.
More likely than not, that supports a shootout on board.
Anybody out there, we have a fallen angel.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. The third hour every Tuesday is the Ultimate Issues Hour. My guest is Eric Metaxas, author of many wonderful books. The latest just out is Atheism Dead? And from a scientific perspective, archaeological perspective, and I guess even existential perspective, he makes the case that really atheism is dead. Out of curiosity, Eric, I am just going to go to a call from an atheist, because I encourage people who differ to call. Bob in Orange County, California. Hello. Hello, Bob.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. Your side and your guest and Krauthammer described the theory of the universe always existing as preposterous, but you substitute a far more preposterous theory of a creator God always existing. If the creator God could always exist, why couldn't the universe always exist?
Because God, if you ask a question, all right, if you ask a question, you need to stop for an answer. The answer is God is not physical, and the universe is physical, and nothing physical is eternal.
No, it's not even an answer.
It is an answer. Tell me why it's not an answer. Why is it not an answer that God is not physical?
It's an artificial differentiation between the physical and the non-physical.
Okay. All right. Listen, I thank you for calling.
Actually, I could just say a word to that, is that the universe, scientists don't believe that the universe always existed. They used to believe that, but when the really incontrovertible evidence came in for the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, that's actually the first chapter or first two chapters of my book is Atheism Dead. It really stymied them because the steady-state universe, the idea that the universe always existed, is consonant with the atheistic view. But the view that the universe began 13.8 billion years ago out of nothing, for most scientists, especially atheistic scientists, it pointed to a creator. It doesn't prove a creator, of course, but it does... It does make you lean in that direction. It begins to make that thesis at least plausible.
Yeah, the reason, by the way, for my listeners that I let the listener go was once he said there's no distinction between physical and non-physical, I thought we were really not talking on the same intellectual wavelength. I might add about this that there's another very powerful thing, for me anyway, and that is DNA. The existence of information is as determinative of there being a God as the existence of a computer implies a computer maker. It's
open and shut, Dennis. It's open and shut. We didn't know this. The thesis of the book is in 1966, you could make this kind of a claim.
Yes.
But the more time has passed, the less possible it is. And so people are stuck. When you have the tremendous coding of DNA in the simplest cell, you can't find a cell simple enough. You find the simplest cell has the most complex information. And that is what led the arch-atheist Anthony Flew around 2005. He said because of that and some other things, he was a lifelong professional philosopher atheist, and he infuriated his colleagues. That's different from Camus and Sartre. But the point is that those who look at this very seriously tend to come out on the other side. Folks like Hitchens and Dawkins, whom I deal with in the end of the book, I'm embarrassed at how shallow and in some cases dishonest they were. It's amazing how much press they got and how much attention they got.
You'll find this of interest. I debated who was it you were just mentioning by Hitchens. Yeah, I debated Hitchens quite a few times. And interestingly, in his autobiography, he mentions Dennis Prager asked me this question that he asks a lot of people who don't think God is necessary for morality. If you were alone in a bad section of a city that you were renting a car in, it was midnight and 10 men were walking toward you, would you or would you not be relieved to know that they had just attended a Bible session? I will tell you how he changed my question. The book right now is Atheism Dead. Eric Metaxas is the author. Let me remind you about a phenomenal product, Nerve Renew. If you have suffered with nerve pain in your feet or hands, as I did for much of my life in my feet, until I actually got terrific inserts prescribed for my feet. They worked, except when I took my shoes off. And I read about Nerve Renew, tried it, threw away the inserts about a year later. Give Nerve Renew a try for 2 weeks for free and 1 year money-back guarantee at trynerverenew.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
It occurs that today, when we're talking, 22 of the 25 ranked colleges in national football by the AP are in red states: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. And in some of those 25 that are in purple states, like Penn State, are in the red part of the purple state. Only Oregon and San Diego State are in blue states. Do you have a theory? I do, as to why college football succeeds in red states far beyond the way it succeeds in blue states today?
Well, I think it represents this. It doesn't, and it's unlike pro football, which has become performance woke art. I think a lot of people in these places incorporate going out to a Saturday football game as in the same sense as 4th of July or standing for the national anthem or singing God Bless America. It's a festive public ritual for red state America, and in a way that pro sports used to be, but now the NBA or the NFL, even Major League Baseball, has forfeited that. It's become a Hollywood-centric or celebrity-centric or New York-centric sport. So I think and actually their popularity is increasing as a result that people innately like sports, but they're shifting from pro sports, I think, to what you talk about.
Well, I also want to add to your assessment. When you think about this, the red states are least amenable to woke college politics.
You're generally correct, because especially the Board of Regents or the overseers, they come from business, they come from all walks of life, and they just don't put up with it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not.
We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager with Eric Metaxas. Book just came out. Is Atheism Dead? It's powerful stuff. So, Eric, this is the way it went. So the story is that I have asked this of atheists all the time, and that is, would you or would you not be relieved to know that 10 men walking toward you in a dark alley had just attended a Bible class? He changed the question in his autobiography to a prayer session. And so I specifically said Bible class because Bible is Judeo-Christian. Prayer could be any religion. So he said, oh, well, what if you're a Jew and it's a bunch of Muslim fundamentalists? So that's how he got around my challenge. Isn't that interesting?
Well, what's interesting is he's dishonest. It's called lying and being dishonest. And if in order to make your case you have to lie or be dishonest, you have no case. Listen, in this book is Atheism Dead. I did not expect to get where I got with regard to the new atheist, but I'm telling you, hearing that, it only confirms what I discovered, that when it really comes to being honest, they have such an animus against the God of the Bible, particularly, that they will just say anything. It really is disheartening, because these are very intelligent people, but when it came to this stuff, it's just awful. It's like Freud. He might be a genius in psychoanalysis, but when you write about Moses and monotheism, you stink. So I mean, as I say, most of the book is science and archaeology. I mean, for example, I got to ask you, did you even know that they had discovered biblical Sodom? Everywhere I ask people, nobody's even heard of this. And I said, this is one of the most astonishing biblical discoveries in the history of the world, and nobody seems to know about it.
Well, I had a vague notion of it, but you know a lot more. So tell us why that means a lot to you.
Well, I mean, because people have, since in the secular 150 years since Darwin, we've kind of discounted the Bible as mythic and so on and so forth. And the middle section of my book has one after the other archaeological corroborations of obscure things in Scripture that you think there's just... The specificity is astonishing. Mm-hmm. But when I met this guy in Albuquerque who's a biblical archaeologist and had written this book about this, I thought, this has to be one of those things where into it, it's kind of like iffy. It is the antithesis of iffy. There was an article published recently, a month ago, in Nature magazine, one of the premier academic peer-reviewed journals in the world. 21 scientists participated in the analysis, and they basically say, well, they can't say he discovered biblical Sodom, but they refer to it. They say that the exact description in the Scripture, the first couple of pages of Genesis, right, 1,700 years ago, is corroborated in what happened in this place in what is now Jordan. In fact, something extremely similar happened in 1908 in Tunguska, Siberia. You probably know about that. The only thing that could create what they discovered at this Tel Haman in Jordan, which we now know is biblical Sodom, is what they call a cosmic airburst event. In other words, an asteroid, meteor, or whatever, about 180 feet in diameter, so not that big, coming into the Earth's atmosphere at about 35,000 miles an hour, explodes a few miles above the surface and creates a heat of such intensity, 700-mile-an-hour winds just obliterates everything. This happened in Siberia in 1908, so we have the proof. It flattened 80 million trees instantly. I mean, it's insane. They say it was the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. So the folks who looked into what my friend Stephen Collins discovered in Jordan, it's the exact same thing. And the more details you get, I wrote 1 or 2 chapters about it, but it's just incontrovertible. You say this is amazing. You might say, oh well, I still don't believe in God, but you no longer can say the Bible is folklore or myth. Over and over again, there are details upon details upon details. I think the larger issue that I'm writing about in the book, when I mention 1966 in the Time magazine article that they asked, is God dead? It presupposes hostility between science and faith. And that's been with us roughly since Darwin, and it's baked in. It's so baked in that even Einstein bought into this nonsense. When he discovered the universe is expanding, he thought, oh, I've got to hide that because my colleagues will think I'm not a serious scientist. They'll think I'm religious. But the point is that now science is leading us to God. It is showing that the intricacy of the universe's design and the Earth's design, it's so exquisite, it's so mind-numbing. You almost can't take in how perfectly calibrated every detail is, including down to simple things like the composition of water, that when you take it in, it's almost frightening. You think, who is this God who created this universe? Now, this is what science is saying, and you can't get around it. The only way they get around it is by saying, well, everything's really perfect, fine, but that's just in this universe. There's probably a multiplicity of an infinity of other universes, and we just happen to be lucky we're in the right one. That's 1,000 times more preposterous than saying, I believe in the God of the Bible.
It's unworthy of scientists to even say it. I have a question based on what we both recognized happened in the 60s. In a nutshell, why do you think it happened in the 60s? Why did everything become topsy-turvy?
Well, I think there are many reasons. First of all, I believe God is the God of history, and you could say, why did the Holocaust occur in the early 40s? Why did there's a strange way things and ideas move, and it's actually through Peter Hitchens, the brother of Christopher Hitchens. Peter Hitchens, of course, is a Christian, and his brother was an atheist. But Peter Hitchens was the one who really alerted me to the fact that most of this stuff happened in Europe after World War I.
Yeah, hold on with that. That's really critical. The book is Atheism Dead, Self-Recommending. Eric Metaxas, the author. It is up at DennisPrager.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there's hope here, if you know where to look for it.
Stream on your phone, tablet, or TV. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America. You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, to give you an idea of how imbalanced the universe is, Eric Metaxas's listeners have donated more than mine to the Alliance Defending Freedom. Now, Eric, you have to admit that is a puzzle.
Well, you know, my audience is a fraction of the size of your audience, so I don't think it says anything about your audience. I think it says something about you.
Good point. No, it's a very valid point.
Oh, would you stop? We always tease each other. Let's talk about something fun, like how God exists, and we know it from science.
Well, let me just remind everybody that it's the final days for collecting for this fantastic group, Alliance Defending Freedom. There's a banner at my website, and I ask you to help them defend freedom in this country. So I asked you what happened in the 60s, and you had mentioned that Peter Hitchens had awakened you to the consequences of World War I.
Well, this actually ties in, no joke, to the Alliance Defending Freedom. I'll explain. Peter Hitchens made me realize that what happened in America in the 60s, the distrust of authority, I mean, you know, Watergate and Vietnam, it kind of was the tipping point for a lot of stuff that had been boiling in the culture, certainly that had been boiling among the cultural elite, you know, pro-Soviets in Hollywood, right? But that happened in Europe after World War I. After World War I, you know, the churches and the kings and so on had sent people into battle, and there was this sense that it's all over. We don't trust those authorities, and we're just going to, you know, dance and you know, the Weimar Germany, the 20s in Europe. It's this story of the loss of authority. Now, why it happened, that's another hour show. But I would say that it's fascinating to see how. I have an article today at foxnews.com where I ask, is atheism the enemy of freedom? And you know this better than I do, that when you have big state government, when you have communism or heavy-handed socialism, the biggest threat to government power and control is people who answer to a higher authority. Those people are trouble if you want to control them.
And that trouble includes Eric Metaxas and Dennis Prager. Eric, it is always a joy.
It's my joy. I love you, my friend. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. That's sweet. I like when guys love each other. The book is Atheism Dead. The author is Eric Metaxas. One might say atheism is dead, but it hasn't been buried. I'm Dennis Prager.